Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be diving in to the Aeldari Codex once again, specifically going to be ranking the Aeldari Detachments. So I thought this would be a good video to start out my series on the specific detachments, how to play them in particular, list building with every detachment, and things like that. I thought I would rank them in a tier list for you guys. Now, what I do know is that I've tried pretty much every single detachment on this list, at least in 1K games, and I can tell you that each and every one is good. They are all very strong, and they all have a shot to be competitive, with the exception of maybe one of them that I'll talk about in just a second. Now, what that means is, whatever your heart's desire is with the new Aeldari Codex, you can do it, and you can be competitive with it. You can build good, strong lists with every single one of these detachments. Now, of course, there will be competitive favorites among the most competitive players in the community, but I strongly believe that every single one of these detachments can be competitive and can win tournament level games at your local game store, RTTs, or even grand tournaments. So let us go ahead and dive right into it and talk about the number 9th spot, which is going to be, of course, as you guys know probably already, the Armored Warhost. Now let's talk about the Armored Warhost, because I think it gets a really bad rap. I think it's still a decent detachment. However, it just doesn't have the tools that the other detachments have, and it doesn't really have anything special except for one little thing that sets it apart. So I will say the Armored Warhost having the ability to advance and shoot with all of your vehicles is nice, but it is not something that is going to win you a lot of games alone, right? Especially now that we have Battle Focus. I think Battle Focus kind of stole the wind out of the sails of the detachment ability, which, is okay because Battle Focus is great and everything like that. Battle Focus does add to this detachment. I think this detachment is much better with it, but the detachment bonus isn't really going to be a standout. As for the enhancements, there's 2 enhancements that are really good still, but I thought they were good before. Being able to redeploy 3 units in your army is really strong, and getting Lone Op on one of your characters and being able to revive, wounds off of your vehicles is really good, especially with the increased durability of Wave Serpents and the Fade Back ability to be able to move D6+1 after you get shot at. I think that is really good. It's just not that good, right? I mean, it's good, it's nice, but it's not super powerful. And then when you look at the stratagems, I think the stratagems still let this detachment down, sadly, right? You have -2 to charge rolls, which is just okay. You have Feel No Pain 5+ against mortal wounds, which again is just okay. It's not the best. It can help you out of a sticky situation, but it's opponent dependent. You have a 6-inch deep strike, which is actually really good with Fuegan and Fire Dragons. But do you really need to deep strike with a Wave Serpent to be able to use Fuegan and Fire Dragons effectively, right? That's the question you have to ask yourself. So I think Armored Warhost, in a lot of ways, benefits greatly from the new codex, but so do all the other detachments, and I just think that the stratagems of the Armored Warhost are a little bit weaker, right? And just to kind of push through another example, one of the stratagems, of course, allows you to advance and get out of the Wave Serpent and disembark. Well, basically, everything in our codex can do that anyway now because of star engines, right? So that's another kind of failing, I think, of this detachment. And when I thought about this detachment when it first came out, I thought, oh, it's obviously written for the Aeldari Codex. And what I've come to find out is actually, I mean, maybe the writer of this detachment had an idea of what was going to be in the codex, but they didn't fully synergize it with a lot of the things in the actual codex. So it is going to go in 9th place, but that doesn't mean I don't think it can be competitive. I just think it's probably the least competitive choice, and I think other detachments do what it wants to do a whole lot better. Okay, let's get into the number 8 spot. Now, the number 8 spot might surprise some of you guys, actually. And I think it's going to take a couple of seconds for you guys to actually realize why. And I'll explain why. But essentially, the number 8 spot is the Spirit Conclave. Now, some of you may be up in arms at this point. Oh my god, the Wraith Detachment's one of the worst. I still think it's competitive, and that means I still think it can do well in tournaments. However, it does lack some of the components that make the other detachments that we're going to talk about very, very strong competitively. Having said that, it is very good, right? In the Spirit Conclave, you have a number of cool things. You have the ability to have battle focus on Wraith units, which is really good, but it only works within range of a Psyker, which can be a little bit easy for your opponent to pick apart. So I think the main weakness of this detachment is that your Psykers are going to be what is going to keep you competitive. And if your opponent has a way to kill your Psykers very quickly or simply ignore the, kind of rough nature of Wraith units, them being a little bit slower, them being tough, but not super tough, like there are hard counters to Wraith units, then I think you're going to have a bad time. I think close combat is one of the weaknesses of this type of list, especially if they have the charge on you, because very easily, there's a lot of lists out there right now that can charge into you, kill every single Wraith Guard or Wraith Blade in the unit, and then you're not going to be able to really do much. You get to retaliate with the Wraith Blades on a 3-up fights back or fight on death, but they're usually going to trade up against you. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a major weakness of this list, which means you need to put a lot more screening units in the list. You're going to need to dilute your Spirit Conclave with things like Rangers, with things like Howling Banshees, with things like the Solitaire, so that you can heroically intervene and, of course, have something to defend against that, which isn't a big deal. It's just that those units aren't going to get any specific buffs in this detachment. However, having said that, we have some pretty good stratagems. We have, of course, the ability to do mortal wounds on charge with Wraith Knights, Wraith Lords, and Wraith Blades, which is really cool. I think this list is really good if you can get the drop on your opponent, right? If you're able to charge your Wraith Blades in, it's fantastic. If you're able to deny your opponent charges because you have Fights First units nearby, or you have Overwatch prepared with D-Sites, I think it can be very good. However, this list isn't innately more powerful or durable, in my honest opinion, than any other detachment. So Wraiths, of course, now let me explain what I mean by that. Wraiths are, at their core, their base stat line, very durable. But you have to understand that for the points you're paying for a Wraith unit, you could, again, for the same amount of points, pay for an Aspect Warrior unit that can just go back into a Wave Serpent, right? They can just fall back into a Wave Serpent, be protected. So Wraiths are going to have a harder time doing it in this detachment, and a lot of the abilities from other detachments prevent Wraiths from doing so. We do have an ability to sticky objectives, which is nice. We do have also an ability to, kind of extend the range of Psykers in this list, so we can have Wraith units operating outside of 12 inches. We also have the Devastating Wounds ability we can put on Wraith units, which is very strong on things like Ghost Swords. And lastly, we do have -1 to damage rolls as well. So, being able to target a unit of yours with -1 damage is a great buff, and it does help with their survivability. But by the same token, your opponent can target a Wraith unit that is out in the open for the most part. You press the button to do -1 damage, pay that CP, and they just go ahead and go for another target. Or they might have the units in their army with Oath of Moment, with the +1 to wound and all that stuff to kill your Wraiths anyway. So I think mainly the problem with this detachment comes down to mobility, right? If you look through the stratagems, there's not a single one that allows you to get more mobility. There's not something that allows you to come from reserve, right? An uppy-downy ability or anything like that. So you really do need to place your units well at the start of the game, and you need to make sure that you keep them alive in every way possible. I do like the enhancements at least some of them. The Rune of Mists may seem like it's not that good, giving the benefit of cover to something, but it's only like 10 points now, which is, you're going to basically always take it, because if it's 10 points, it gives something cover. Something might not have cover in a certain turn. You're going to want that, right? So it does add some durability to your list. Higher Duty allows a Spirit Seer to go back into a transport if an enemy moves within 9 inches, or just basically it allows you to move 6 inches. But, you know, with that, it's a normal move so that you can move back into a transport, which helps you keep some of your Psykers alive for longer, which I do really like. So there are some really powerful things about this detachment. I think I played it in 1,000 points. I had a lot of fun with it. I played triple Wraithlord. I played a couple of units of Wraith Blades and some Spirit Seers and some Warlocks on bikes. And I found that the Vengeance of the Dead ability was really powerful when you're able to, you know, charge the right targets in your opponent's army with Warlocks. They then die, and your whole army gets +1 to hit and +1 to wound against them. That's really good for Wraithlords, who already hit on a 3+, so now they're hitting on a 2+, and they're going to be re-rolling 1s against certain targets. So my opponent's Dreadnoughts were not having a good time. Let's just put it that way. However, like I said, I think there are ways to play around that. If my opponent had, you know, screened better, which is a little bit harder in 1,000 points, if my opponent had screened a little bit better, if my opponent had more familiarity with the Wraith units that I was running, despite my attempt to explain how they worked to him, then, you know, he would have probably played a better game. And also, 3 Wraithlords in 1,000 points is kind of a stat check. So I just felt this list was very stat checky. And that's kind of how I feel about the detachment in general. I don't think it has quite enough mobility to be able to score a lot of the secondaries every single turn. You're going to need to take other units outside of Wraiths. And like I said before, you're not getting a lot of benefit from those units in this detachment. So that's what I think about Spirit Conclave, but let me know in the comment section what you guys think. I still think it's really good. I just think it's less mobile than the rest of the stuff in the army. And Eldar's main power is going to be its mobility and ability to hit very hard. And I think this detachment is just, you know, they trade in the mobility and the hard-hitting nature of Eldar for extra durability, which might not actually be that competitive at the end of the day. But having said that, some of you are going to flame me in the comments probably about that. But, you know, having said that, I do think it can win tournaments still, if built properly. Okay, let's talk about the next detachment on the list. And of course, we're going to be talking about the Guardian Battle Host. So the Guardian Battle Host is number 7. I think it's a really cool detachment. I love the detachment ability. Basically, able to get +1 to hit if you're on an objective, or +1 to hit against opponents that are on an objective with Warwalkers, with Guardians, and support weapons. I think that's really cool. It's really thematic, and it's a decent detachment rule. But not everything is always going to be on an objective, and you're not always going to be on an objective. So it is good, but it's situationally good. It's not very good against opponents that are staging against you. And I think one of the main weaknesses of this list, which I'll talk about a little later, is close combat. And I'll explain why. But essentially, you know, close combat units that are staging are not typically going to be on objectives, and you're not going to be able to typically shoot them from objectives. However, the enhancements are really good. So you're going to be wanting to take a lot of Guardians in this detachment. Guardians are solid units. You can have the ability to give Infiltrate to 2 Guardian units. That is the Ethereal Pathway. I like to give this on Storm Guardians. And I actually, again, I ran a 1,000-point list with this detachment with 2 units of Storm Guardians. I didn't put any kind of upgrades on them. I just, you know, sent them forward as infiltrators, and they were able to sticky 2 of the objectives right off the bat, and my opponent was not able to kill them. I think actually I did have a couple Warlocks in each unit, but I didn't invest too deeply into them. I just wanted them to get, you know, some benefits from, you know, maybe an extended Overwatch or something like that. Protector of the Paths is a once per game free Overwatch, which allows you to Overwatch on a 4+ if you're on an objective. This is really good for one of those Guardian Death Stars I talked about, or a big unit of Dire Avengers. Typically speaking, though, you're going to want Dire Avengers in this army, or excuse me, sorry, you're going to want Guardians in this army you're probably only going to want Dire Avengers for a Zerman, just because everybody's going to want a Zerman. He is an auto-include in basically every detachment. So that's an okay strategy, or that's an okay enhancement, but it's not the best. You have the Breath of All, which gives you the ability on a Storm Guardian unit to reroll damage rolls on fusion guns or attack rolls on flamers. Again, it's decent, but you're paying a lot of points for maybe not too many more hits, or maybe not that much more damage, right? So the enhancements are decent. I would say they're not the best out of the detachments, but they're okay. As for the stratagems, I think they are really good with Guardians. I think GW did a good job designing them around the strengths of Guardian units. You have an ability that allows you to reroll the wound roll against enemy units on objectives, which is strong. You have the ability to have -1 to wound on your unit if you're on an objective. And again, a lot of the strengths of this army are going to be based around being on objectives and your enemy being on objectives. Vol's Vengeance, I think, is probably one of the weaker ones. It allows a Warwalker unit to shoot after a Guardian unit has been destroyed within a certain range of it. I think it's range 12. Never mind. It has unlimited range. I lied. It has unlimited range. However, you know, your opponent's probably not going to just do that if your opponent knows you have Warwalkers on the battlefield. So it might not actually be that effective. It's very situational. If your opponent knows you have it, then they're not going to destroy a Guardian unit until your Warwalkers are destroyed. So again, it's very situational. Skilled players won't just let you hit them for free. You have Time to Strike, which is an advance in charge with Storm Guardians, which is pretty cool. You get an automatic 6-inch advance, and then you get to charge. This is really awesome, but Storm Guardians aren't the best in close combat. So you really need to probably just outfit this unit with a bunch of Warlocks and Eldrad, maybe. I think that's pretty good with Eldrad and, basically a Guardian Death Star there, the Storm Star. But outside of that, I don't really see that being a thing you want to do. Blades of Azurian is you get the pistol ability in close combat with your Guardians or Dire Avengers. Again, this is something very situational. It's kind of cool when you have it, but you're mostly going to want to just fall back and shoot whatever's in combat if you do survive. And then the Cost of Victory is probably the best stratagem of the list. You get to take a Guardian unit, put it back in reserve, and every Guardian heals in the unit. So you basically get all your destroyed Guardians back. But it only works if you have Guardians in the unit left. So if it's fully destroyed, unfortunately, you won't be getting anything from it. So overall, I think the stratagems are good. I think this army does have mobility because Guardian Defenders have free fade away, which when they get shot at, they can move d6+1, which is extremely good. You have some good stratagems there that increase your damage and survivability. But what you don't have is you don't have any kind of raw power that the other detachments have, and you don't have the super mobility that they have either. You don't have an ability that can teleport you around the battlefield. You don't have an ability that automatically grants you the, a move, shoot, move, right? You don't have things like that, and a lot of your units are just going to be Guardians, which again, can work. I think that, triple farce here, triple Guardian Defender, maybe 2 squads of Storm Guardians, one with Eldrad and one just infiltrating up the battlefield normally could be really powerful. I played Eldrad in 1,000 points, and I wish I had actually outfitted that Storm Guardian squad to be more of a death squad instead of just minimum, but I really just didn't have the points in 1,000 to kind of make that work. You're also going to want things like Wraith Lords in your list to add a little bit of toughness, so that you don't just get bowled over by close combat. There's not a lot of close combat defenses that this list has. You have the ability to overwatch things with Warlocks, but if there's anything that's tough enough to survive that, you're going to have a little bit of trouble. There's no fall back and shoot in this detachment. A lot of your units cannot fall back and shoot. You don't have feigned retreat. So if somebody can lock you up with a bunch of combat units, if you go against Blood Angels or something like that, they're actually just going to rip through your entire Guardian unit with no problems. And then, that's a lot of points down the drain. You're not going to be able to hit them back that effectively. So you're going to be losing a lot of efficiency with your units. And also, if they're just going after you, you're not necessarily going to be on objectives anymore, or they're going to just have control over the objectives, right? So a lot of the benefits from stratagems and stuff like that are not going to come into play. Of course, they could probably be on an objective, but if they outtrade you, then you're kind of out of luck. You're kind of losing that game. So personally, in the game that I played, I was playing against Blood Angels, and the player was able to do significant damage to my Guardian units. The Storm Guardian squads got pretty dinged up in the first. They did infiltrate, and I got charged turn 1. Eldrad's unit managed to survive because of Eldrad alone. By the way, guys, Eldrad's combat ability, not the best in the game, but certainly not the worst. He can kill Marines, so his unit did okay with the stratagem support and -1 to wound and everything like that. But the other squad of Storm Guardians got ripped apart pretty quickly by Death Company, and with good positioning, my opponent was able to kind of dodge a lot of the attacks from, turn 2, turn 3, when I couldn't really get line of sight on his units. And eventually that did give him the advantage. He was able to charge a lot of my squads before I was able to charge him. I was able to overwatch and get some kills here and there against stuff, but it just wasn't enough. I mean, even 4 warlocks with, their, super flamers are gonna hit just okay against things like Blood Angels and stuff like that, right? Especially if they have a 3-up save and feel no pain. It's really dice dependent, right? You could be rolling kind of either really good or really bad, and if you roll bad on that Overwatch, if you roll your 4 flamer attacks for d6 attacks apiece and you roll like between 4 dice, you roll like a 6, that sucks. And that's happened to me. That's what happened to me, and that squad got roasted. So again, I know it's a dice game and stuff, but I just feel like there's some RNG moments from the Guardian Battle Host that can really just upset the tide of the game. Now, having said that, I do think at 2,000 points, maybe the Guardian Battle Host is more well-rounded. Being able to take units outside of Guardians can really help you mitigate those weaknesses. So taking units of things like Howling Banshees for heroic intervention with fights first is really useful. I wish I had taken some Howling Banshees in my 1K list. I wish I had taken the Solitaire. I think those kind of units can really support it. So just like I said with the Spirit Conclave, which is kind of vulnerable to close combat, the Guardian Warhost or Battle Host is even more vulnerable to close combat, so you want to make sure you have those units to support yourself. Okay, let's talk about number 6. Now, coming in at number 6, we have the Ghosts of the Webway, the Harlequin Detachment. Now, I originally thought I was going to put this higher on the list, but I think what keeps the Ghosts of the Webway kind of back a little bit is they have trouble dealing with really fast, hard-hitting armies that can get around corners. Especially if they can destroy multiple transports in a single activation, you're in trouble. Again, I think these guys are better into combat armies because they have good combat themselves. They have a fight on death stratagem. They're able to engage opponents quickly and efficiently. But at the end of the day, they're still just toughness 3, 4+ invulnerable save models that will go down to a flurry of attacks. So, having said that, I think Ghosts of the Webway is actually pretty powerful and can win tournaments, especially with the ability to just kind of ignore enemy units when charging and just kind of charge over them. That makes screening a lot harder. The troop is OC2 apiece, so they can control objectives much better. You have some really good enhancements in Segarak's Coil, which gives you impact attacks, mortal wound impact attacks, which is really strong. You have, of course, the Mistweave, which is on the Shadow Seer, which gives the unit infiltrate. And you have Murder's Jest on the Death Jester, which allows him to get automatic critical hits on any hit roll when targeting a unit under half strength. So those are all really good enhancements. The Mask of Secrets doesn't seem that great, just basically makes models take a desperate escape test if they want to fall back from the Quins, which I don't find that useful in general. Now, where this army really shines, I think, is the stratagems. For the first time, we see some major mobility stratagems, and stratagems are going to help you control the battle. So you have things like Exit the Stage, which is an uppy downy for any Harlequin infantry unit, or actually just Harlequin's units in general, not even infantry. You could pick up a Void Weaver if you wanted to with this stratagem, as long as they're not within engagement range. So I think that is extremely strong. You can also, of course, revive your characters, which is extremely good. It's not limited to once per game. It's once per game per character. So your Solitaire gets 2 lives. Your Troop Masters get 2 lives. Your Shadow Seer gets 2 lives, right? There's a lot of play to that. Being able to activate multiple times with your units is how this army wins. This army activates as many times as you possibly can. And that's kind of the win condition of this army, is you want to make sure your Harlequin units are able to fight, kill, get back in their transports, and then do it again the next turn. And as long as you are trading up with your opponent each and every turn with your units, your army is going to have more models left than their army, and you will be able to score big on turns 4 and 5 when your opponent has nothing to stop you. And of course, the staged death stratagem that allows your characters to revive themselves is part of this. But you also have some other pretty cool things, right? You have the ability to charge a unit at the start of the fight phase, right? So if an opponent doesn't charge you, maybe fails a charge against you, you can charge them. Or maybe your opponent ends their move within 6 inches of you and doesn't want to charge, well, you can charge them instead, right? So that's really powerful. You have things like the Trickster's Retort, which is a movement stratagem that allows you to reactive move when your opponent moves within 9 inches. And you can move 6 inches, which is really good. Again, you could use this move to move back into transports, which, of course, your army is filled with because you have a bunch of Star Weavers here. And then lastly, you have Hero's Fall, which is a fight on death ability, right? So your opponent charges you, gets the jump on you, you can fight on death and still do some damage back. Overall, I think Ghost of the Webway is extremely powerful, and I think what brings it all together is, of course, the new Harlequin data sheets, which are extremely powerful, getting Dev Wounds base on their weapons, being able to choose between rerolls 1s to hit, +1 to wound, or -1 to hit is going to help you in a variety of situations. If you need to survive on an objective to score that objective, you're at -1 to hit, right? If you need to kill an enemy unit that's a little bit tougher, then you are at +1 to wound. If you're having no troubles with the wound roll, maybe you're going against IG or something like that you're already wounding very easily with your attacks, then maybe you go for rerolls 1s to hit, right? There's tons of options for this army. However, it doesn't benefit anything but Harlequin units, obviously. So the goal with this list is probably to get as many Harlequins in it as possible and just out-activate your opponent. There are going to be some armies, though, where you're going to have trouble punching into them, even with Dev Wounds, right? Armies that reduce Dev Wounds, I think Custodes, are going to be extremely hard for Harlequins to beat. Don't ask me why. Well, actually, yes, ask me why. So the reason is because they struggle against things that have fights first, that if you charge into them, they can just kill you, right? Even if you fight on death on a 4-up, it's sometimes not enough to be able to guarantee that you're going to kill anything in return. So Custodes who have fights first, it's going to be tough. And Custodes are tough, right? They're hard to kill. So I think Harlequins can have, struggles against those types of armies. Slaanesh demons have fights first, usually. That can be very difficult to actually overcome because not only are they very tough, but they're also very killy in combat. So being able to strike before you do can suck. So yeah, Ghost of the Webway, really strong detachment. Harlequin's got a huge buff in the Codex, but I just think they're missing a couple of things against the most competitive armies in the game that might give them a little bit of a hard time. Okay, let's talk about number 5. Now, number 5, it's going to surprise some of you, and maybe even some of you will turn the video off at this moment. But I think number 5 is Aspect Host. Now, let me give you my reasoning for this. Obviously, I think Aspect Host is incredibly powerful, right? Aspect Host is going to be one of those armies that can punch up really effectively really easily, and it can destroy multiple models and multiple units in a single turn. However, I think because everybody's talking about it, obviously it has the biggest big D damage in the game right now. Fire Dragons with Fuegan, Azurman with Dire Avengers. People are talking about this because of the damage it just absolutely does. It just dumps damage on your opponent. Now, the reason I think that this is kind of overstated in a lot of ways is because even though on paper it looks really good, in practice, a good opponent will not let you just do this to their entire army. Your opponent is not typically going to let you just move a unit of Fire Dragons in the middle of a bunch of tanks and say, yes, please shoot 3 tanks and kill all of them in a single activation, right? I have never, even a more novice opponent, when you tell them what Fire Dragons do, they're just not going to put their tanks together, right? They're going to move them apart so that you can't get all of them in a single activation. And what I think ends up happening is you charge, or, not charge, but you move your Fire Dragons up, you dump them out, you kill a big target, kill a big vehicle, maybe, I don't know, a Redemptor Dreadnought or anything kind of high value, right? You get back in your Wave Serpent, and you wait for your opponent to shoot you so that you can fade away. But if your opponent is able to then follow up with a charge, then you can very easily find yourself in a position where your Fire Dragons are locked up in a combat and they can't easily get out. Yes, of course they can fall back, right? But that is going to change your game plan, and a good opponent is just going to lock you up into combat at that point, right? The Wave Serpent is not that hard to kill. So a big unit that can kill a Wave Serpent in close combat and then consolidate into some Fire Dragons with Fuegan. Fuegan's good, guys, but he can't kill everything out there in the game, right? So let me give you an example. And I think really this is exactly the problem I came into. Was I was not even running full 10-mans. I was running 5-man units because I just didn't have the points in a 1,000-point game to actually field the big unit of Fire Dragons. But, one of my turns came forward, shot forward, killed a Dreadnought. It was actually, I can't remember the combat version one, but it wasn't the Redemptor. It was the Brutalis. That's what it's called. It was the Dreadnought Brutalis. And, got back into my Wave Serpent or whatever, moved back, and my opponent was just able to charge the Wave Serpent, destroy it, and then charge or consolidate, into the unit inside. And the problem with this detachment is it has no fallback and shoot and charge, right? If you look at it, it has a lot of things to allow you to do extra damage, right? To kind of ignore modifiers, but it doesn't have anything that just says fallback and shoot. So a good opponent can tie your Aspect Warriors up into combat. And yes, again, like I said, you have some very good combat Phoenix Lords, which can deal some significant damage to most units. But there are things in the game that don't care, right? If you look at things like Slaanesh Demons, for example, you can run forward and you can kill Shalaxi with 10 Fire Dragons and Fuegan. And you can maybe even kill a Chariot, a Slaanesh Seeker Chariot at the same time. But then you get back in your transport and you're going to get swamped and your unit's not going to survive. So yeah, Shalaxi is very expensive, so maybe that would be worth it. But you are losing a unit of 10 Fire Dragons, which is 200 points. Fuegan, which is 120, which he will get dragged down even with his revivability. And the Wave Serpent, which is 115 points. So you are losing a considerable chunk of your army, and you are trading fairly evenly. I can't remember how much Shalaxi is, but I don't think she's 400 points. So yeah, Aspect Host I think is really good, but a lot of people are kind of talking about the 10-man Doom Squad of Fire Dragons and Fuegan, and the 10-man Doom Squad with Azurman, the Assman, and the Wave Serpent. And I think they're very good, don't get me wrong, but your opponent's not going to let you just wipe out their whole army in a single activation, right? So there's going to have to be some changes over time made to Aspect Host to make it a little more competitive. I think 5-man units are probably better. Like 2 5-man units in a Wave Serpent is probably a little bit better because you can drop one squad of Fire Dragons back a little bit, and then do the thing with the Wave Serpent and the, Fuegan and 5 Fire Dragons. You can move them forward, and then at least you have something to fall back on, and you're not losing as many points on the clapback. I also think you want different types of units other than Aspect Warriors in this list. I think you probably want Shroud Runners. You probably want, scouting units that can screen for you so that you have the best positions available. So, as for the enhancements as well of this detachment, I think they're really good, right? You have some really cool enhancements that can go on an Autarch. An Autarch Wayleaper, for example, can take with warp spiders, can take the +1 damage and precision, which make that unit extremely good at killing targets in combat. You can give something the ability, right? An Autarch, of course, because all of these detachments all of these enhancements are Autarch based. You can have something that gives your Autarch extra OC, right? Your unit extra OC, +1 OC on everything, which is good for taking objectives. You have the Mantle of Wisdom, which allows you to reroll not only the hit rolls from the detachment ability, but also the wound rolls of one, which is really good. But it is very pricey. It's a lot of points. Now, I didn't mention this in the beginning, but of course the detachment rule itself is really powerful. You have the ability to reroll 1s to hit with your aspects or 1s to wound, which again is kind of the reason why people are looking at this detachment as the most competitive, because it has the most damage. But again, like I said, this detachment has no kind of uppy-downy mobility, and it does not have any ability to fall back and shoot and charge, which I think are two things which might cause a little bit of issue. Okay, so that's Aspect Host. Obviously, though, I really enjoyed playing Aspect Host. It was really fun, but I did see some moments in the game where I was like, oh, okay, that's a weakness of the detachment. Not being able to fall back and shoot. That sucks, right? So now I'm stuck in combat with a Ballistus Dreadnought. That's not a Ballista. I think I keep getting it wrong. What is it called? It's the combat Dreadnought. I get all the names confused, but it's the combat Dreadnought, whatever that is. I just said it too. Horrible. My memory is horrible. Anyway, so, those are things you don't want in your list, obviously, to be able to just be tied up so easily. Okay, let's talk about number 4. Number 4 is going to be the Wind Rider Host. Now, the Wind Rider Host, I think, is slightly superior to the Aspect Host because not only does it have a lot of damage, but it has the mobility to be able to back it up. And it does have an extreme amount of mobility. Being able to pick up 2 units a turn, drop them anywhere you want outside of 9 inches is really good from Strat Reserve. And the fact that you count as being 1 turn higher for bringing your units in from Strat Reserve means your opponent can't screen you as effectively in the beginning of the game. You also have the ability to reroll wounds when you come in from reserve. So you can have big units doing big damage with lethal hit shuriken cannons coming in, rerolling all their hits, rerolling all their wounds, and doing some insane damage numbers to enemy units. Also, the detachment has really good mobility with Shining Spears, right? Shining Spears being able to already charge through terrain and move through terrain, being able to advance and charge with a unit like that is absolutely insane, especially with battle focus, which is really good. Then you have some pretty good enhancements as well. You have enhancements like the... Sorry, let me get the name here real quick so that I'm not... Yeah, the Seer Sight Strike. That's the enhancement, which gives you anti-monster, anti-vehicle 2+ with Eldritch Storm. Very good on, a Skyrunner, a Farseer Skyrunner. Something that can come in with your Wind Riders and hit a monster or vehicle pretty hard. That's really important because this army, outside of, taking Aspect Warriors and stuff, doesn't hit vehicles as hard as you would think. And you have other stuff as well, right? You have the Echoes of Uthlanesh, which allow you to get CP on a 5+ if you're in your deployment zone, a 4+ if you're in dead no man's land, and if you're in the enemy's deployment zone, it's a 3+. It's probably just going to be a 4+ most of the time, but sometimes it will be a 3+, and that's pretty good. You also have the Mirage Field for -1 to hit, and the First Drawn Blade for Scouts 9. Obviously, Scouts 9 is a great ability, and I think it's perfect on one of those big squads of Wind Riders with a Farseer Skyrunner and some Warlock Skyrunners. As for the stratagems, I talked about the rerolls wounds, but you also have Overflight, which allows you to shoot at a unit, kill it, and then move 7 inches. So, obviously, being able to kill something and then move 7 is really powerful, especially with Shining Spears, right? They do have shooting attacks, and if you're able to kind of finagle it correctly, you can weaken a unit with your other Wind Rider squads, you can kill that unit with the Shining Spears, you can move them 7 inches as a result, and, by the way, guys, there is no restriction for charging afterward. So if you're able to do this with Shining Spears, you can technically advance with your Shining Spears with that stratagem, which is Wind of Blades, allows you to advance and charge, right? So you could advance with those. You can kill a unit with their shooting, move another 7 inches. And by the way, guys, you can use, with all of this, they can be immune to Overwatch because of Battle Focus. Move another set, right? Move that 7 inches, and then they can charge through terrain and and kill the unit that they're trying to fight, right? So that's really cool. I think there's a lot of cool things you can do with one unit of Shining Spears in this list that would just absolutely blow some players' minds. But you also have things like Spiraling Evasion, which give you a 4+ invulnerable save, which makes you more durable, right? You have Focused Firepower, which increases your armor penetration characteristic, which is also really good on things like shuriken cannons. Also, by the way, guys, Shroud Runners in this type of army are absolutely fantastic. Being able to hit something with Ignores Cover and also get sustained hits 1 and AP -1 with scatter lasers. It's really good against light infantry. And then you have, lastly, of course, Daring Riders, which allows you to essentially come out of reserve within 6 inches of your opponent so they can't screen you as effectively. Guys, this detachment is super strong. It's super fast. It hits really hard. And I think the only weakness of this type of list is that a lot of your stuff is easy to pick off, right? It's very fragile, but that's Eldar, right? Jet bikes are normally a little bit tougher, but we did get a nerf to the durability of jet bike models. Shroud Runners, -1 save. Wind Riders, -1 save, right? So they are less durable. Shining Spears are less durable. They don't have the -1 to hit all the time anymore, right? They're more expensive. But that's basically it, right? They took a big durability hit, which means if you don't kill everything that can threaten you, you will die. And I think what's going to happen in these games is you're going to hit the enemy hard and fast in the first couple turns. You're going to strike a lot of their units down, and then you're probably going to start losing your stuff. So what happened in my 1,000-point game with the Wind Rider host was that in the first couple of turns, I was able to get some really nice kills on several of his units. I killed a Redemptor Dreadnought, even with the -1 to damage rolls. And I have to say, that's just thanks to the Shining Spears and the Wind Riders in combination. We're able to bring that thing down. But surprisingly, Shroud Runners also did a number of, good damage against intercessors. They were able to kill quite a few infantry models, just hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, with AP -1 and rerolls to wound was very strong coming out of reserve. And even in 1,000 points, when you're not bringing as many units up and down, it's still really good because you can just have models in reserve normally, so you're still getting that benefit from the detachment, even if you're not picking models up constantly. And after I was able to kill a couple of big targets, my opponents started shooting back, and yeah, my Wind Riders died very quickly. I think one of my units of 3 Wind Riders basically just got wiped out by a unit of 5 Intercessors, which was a little embarrassing and I didn't think would happen, but in the open, they had a 5-up save with AP -1 bolt shots, and with Oath of Moment, units go down quick, right? My Farseer, my big unit of Wind Riders with the Farseer and everything, went down fairly quickly to some heavy intercessors that were able to draw a line of sight on them and shoot them down. And stuff started dying, but I was able to retaliate just as well during my own turns. and it ended up being an absolute bloodbath, and I was able to win the trading war there because Marines are typically more expensive than Eldar units, and I was able to kind of finish out the game. And we had a very close game, but I scored a bunch of points on secondary, and during the last turn of the game, I scored a bunch on primary as well. So I think Windrider Host is going to be a competitor. I don't even think I was running the, best kind of list for 1,000 points, to be honest with you. But I do think that, especially in 2K, it's going to be even way better because you're going to be able to take more small units. You're going to be able to just overwhelm your opponent very quickly, and your opponent's just going to not be able to keep up trading, and, they might do damage back, but they're not going to be able to keep up with you in scoring. Okay, let's talk about the next detachment, which is going to be the Devoted of Ynnead. So the Devoted of Ynnead is going to be extremely good. Being able to move 7 inches after a unit of yours is destroyed in the shooting phase at the end of the phase is exceptionally powerful. I think the playstyle of the Devoted of Ynnead is a little bit slower. It's a little bit more methodical, kind of more like a chess game, I would think. Something dies, you strike back. That's going to be the Devoted of Ynnead. You definitely need to build this army in a way in which you have expendable units at the beginning of the game, scoring objectives, scoring secondaries really early, baiting your opponent out to be able to try to kill those units. And then once they do kill those units, you set up for a greater attack. However, the reason why I didn't place it higher on this list, because I know there's people out there who think this is going to be the best detachment and the most broken, is because as of now, it doesn't seem like you can put anything in a Wave Serpent or a Falcon, which is really strange because the rules for the Ynnead detachment say that every single unit in your army becomes a Ynnead unit. Now, obviously, this is just GW kind of with, keyword salad here, just messing up a little bit, because Ynnead units do not, I think, actually refer to the keyword Ynnead. I think they're referring to actual Ynnead units, like you know how they say Ynnead Reavers and Ynnead Incubi and Ynnead Witches and Ynnead Coprolites? I strongly believe that's what it actually means. I would almost bet good money on that they're referring to the Ynnead units in the Codex, not the Ynnead units that are given the keyword Ynnead in the Ynnead detachment. I think that's the case. However, the rules as written people out there are going to say, no, they're Ynnead. And they would be right, because there's nothing that contradicts that. There's nothing that goes against that, right? It does straight up say in the detachment, yes, those units are now Ynnead units, which is like, okay, I guess I can't be in a Wave Serpent anymore, right? So that's a little bit weird. I think they obviously missed that. GW missed that in the last FAQ. They will notice it eventually, but I think they're running under the assumption that, well, yeah, I mean, the only things we're talking about here, guys, are the Dark Eldar stuff, because they're called Dark Eldar, or no, sorry, they're called Ynnead Witches and Ynnead Incubi and stuff, right? So obviously they are referring to those units. Rules is interpreted, right? If you're at your local game store playing a casual game with friends, obviously that's what it means. Obviously that's what it means. It's not a big deal. But unfortunately, at tournaments and stuff, they might interpret that a different way, and you're not going to be able to do it. Having said that, I don't actually think that Wave Serpents and Falcons are necessary for the Ynnead to be competitive. And the ability to, be in a Venom, for example, and kill something, and then hop back in the Venom, and then when the Venom is destroyed, your unit maybe loses an Incubi, or loses a Witch, or loses whatever you have in the Venom, and then you automatically gets fights first and access to a bunch of, cool stratagems and special rules. I think that's really strong. And when you think about how powerful that can be on a unit of, Incubi with Yvrain or something along those lines, it becomes extremely good, right? I mean, that's an understatement. They have a lot of interesting stratagems which allow you to fight on death automatically. So for 2 CP, automatic fight on death. The only issue is you can't take Eldrad, so you can't take extra CP generation in this detachment, which I think will kind of, stimmy it a little bit. It will kind of make the detachment a little bit less powerful, but it's still very good. Having fast units that can hit an enemy hard, die, and then give your other units even more speed is amazing. The Yinkarn is good in this detachment. Having something die, moving the Yinkarn 12 inches at the end of the shooting phase, and then being able to kind of like move it another 12 inches or even 14 with battle focus, and then charge something in the enemy backfield within the first couple turns is kind of insane, right? That's really good. Wraith Lords are really good in this type of list because your Vrain's a Psyker, and you're probably going to be taking, single Warlocks and stuff like that to proc the, ability to die and move 7 inches. Or move whatever you want, move your movement value is really strong. This detachment also has some good damaging abilities, right? Good, extra damage stratagems. Being able to essentially just kind of rip your opponent apart in combat is good. And especially with all the fights first you're getting, you have a surge move, in which case, if somebody shoots you and then you can fade back, if you're able to make it into combat with them, it's a surge move and you're able to fight them in combat. That's really strong. So, the Devoted of Ynnead, obviously really good. I think, again, like I said in the beginning, when I started talking about the detachment, they are going to be a very tactical and very almost chess-like army that operates by eliminating threats one by one. It's going to be hard for an opponent to really deal with the free movement that your army's going to get every turn. But yeah, it is very strong. It does hit very hard. I just wish that they would fix the thing about transports because that will make the army more well balanced. And I think there's only really one or two ways to build this detachment, which kind of limits its ability to be that diverse. Okay, let's look at the second place here, which is going to be Seer Council, ranked second. Now, obviously, that puts Warhost in first, so we'll talk about that in a second. But why is Seer Council in number 2? I think I've run this. By the way, this is one of the armies that I ran in 2,000 points. And guys, it's amazing. So first of all, this army has pretty much everything you would need to win a game of 40k in both style and, well, let me just put it this way. Style and just absolute Eldar trickery, just to the max, right? This detachment has really good mobility. It has really good durability. It has really good repositioning. It has really good damage. It has everything you would need. And on top of that, it has no issues with CP because you have so many free stratagems. So that means on the scoring side of things, if you want to discard something and redraw it every single turn to get the best possible secondaries, you can do that because you have free stratagems every single turn. You are going to have Eldrad in this list, so you are going to be getting extra CP as well. On top of this, you have probably one of the best defensive enhancements in the game. A 4+ Feel No Pain against Psychic, Mortal Wounds, and Dev Wounds. That's insane. You put this on a Guardian squad, that Guardian Death Star I talked about, and even if opponents are trying to get past your armor and, invols and stuff on your Warlocks, they're not going to be able to do it that easily because you have that 4+ Feel No Pain, right? So that's very good for the points. It is 25 points, but in my opinion, it's worth it to put it on one of your Guardian Death Stars. And you probably want at least 1 or 2 Guardian Death Stars in your army as well. This detachment works pretty much super well with most of the things in the Eldar Codex. There's not much that's not good in this detachment, but, obviously the standouts being the Guardian Death Star for me personally, and things that are able to kind of go around the battlefield very quickly. Azurman and Dire Avengers are very good. Just Dark Reapers are very good, right? Just being able to Psychic Shield something and make it an 18-inch lone op for long-range units. Extremely powerful on infantry. You have things that are able to just be picked up and redeployed anywhere you want outside of 9 inches of enemy units, which is Unspoken Truth, which is an insane stratagem. You have the ability to get Ignores Cover on any unit you want, with critical wounds being AP -1, an additional AP -1, which is really strong with certain units. And in general, you're going to have basically a stratagem for every single thing you want to do. Having also extra mortal wound damage when people get within range of a psyker within 9 inches, and just being able to roll 6 dice and on 3 pluses you suffer mortals is going to be insanely good for objective play. And the last point I want to make about the last stratagem is, of course, the battle shock test, because a lot of people looked at that stratagem and they thought it sucked. It's actually one of the most insane stratagems for victory points in the entire game. It works in either command phase. You target an enemy unit within 18 inches with one of your psychers, and they take a battle shock test at -1. Well, guess what, guys? If you have an opponent on an objective in the early game that you don't want to give points to, but you don't really want to or couldn't deal with that unit, they may not even score points on it, right? Usually, most units, Marines, are leadership 6. If you push them to leadership 7, they have a really good chance of failing a battle shock test. And if they fail, they don't score victory points, right? They don't score primary points. And that might not seem that good because it's like, well, what if they pass? Well, the worst thing that happens is, okay, they pass, right? But are they going to be able to pass 5 turns in a row? I don't think so, right? Or you can use it on enemy units in your own command phase that are contesting your objectives that you're trying to control. So if you have a unit in combat with something and your opponent has like 1 more OC than you do, then you can use this on that objective and you can score victory points yourself if they fail, which is a really good stratagem. So overall, I know not many people like it, but I really like it. It's a really good stratagem and it makes your opponent kind of maybe even overcommit to certain objectives. So I really like that one. So basically, Seer Council kind of has everything in it. It has extra damage, mobility, it has utility, it has tricks, it has tips, it has all kinds of stuff. So I really like the Seer Council. I think it's one of the strongest detachments in the Aeldari Codex, and using it was very fun, and I felt like there wasn't a lot my opponent could do in a lot of these cases, right? Psychic Shield, the combination of Fade Back and Psychic Shield is very strong for protecting your infantry. And the ability to just redeploy anything you want to is incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. Okay. Let's talk about the best detachment in the list, in my opinion, which is Warhost. So this was the other army that I played in 2K. And it's not just because it was 2K that I like it so much. It's because it's basically like Seer Council. It has almost everything, except that it doesn't just benefit infantry, right? Seer Council, most of the stuff is just infantry based, but Warhost also really benefits vehicles. So being able to essentially get an extra battle focus token every turn is really good, but it does more than that. It gives you +1 movement on your swift movement, agile maneuver, right? Your battle focus ability. Instead of +2 inches, it gives you +3. And then on top of that, your fade back ability and your opportunity seized ability of your battle focus, which allow you to fade back or, kind of make a D6 +1 move normally, is now a D6 +2, which may not seem like a lot, but because a lot of the base size is increased for Eldar, it's actually a big deal. It makes it so that even if you roll a 1, you can get behind walls because you're going to be moving at minimum 3 inches. So the detachment ability is really strong. The enhancements are also really good. And let's check these out for a second because I think a lot of people overlook some of these, but they're actually pretty good. So the Phoenix Gem kind of is expensive, so you're probably not going to want to take that. That one, unfortunately, is just not going to be taken all that much. But if we look at things like the Gift of Foresight, a lot of people will look at that and say, oh, that's lame. That's just, what is it, a free command reroll? Who cares, right? But here's the thing, right? It's once per battle round. You can use it 5 times in a game. So that saves you 5 CP that you would normally use. If you put this on a Farseer and a Guardian squad, not only is the Farseer able to flip a dice to a 6 every turn on the Brightlands, but it's also able to re-roll the dice every round, which is really good. It is going to make up its points worth if you can make that Guardian squad live over the course of the game, and which It will, because you have the greater mobility to do so. Timeless Strategist is also very good as well because it gives you an additional battle focus token. So not only is your battle focus improved, but you have more units that are able to utilize it. Now, Psychic Destroyer gives 1 to the damage characteristic of ranged psychic weapons by the Psyker. I think it's just too expensive. It's like 25 points. A little bit too expensive, but you know, D3 plus 1 on Elder Storm isn't bad either. Now, where this detachment really starts to pick up speed, because we know the enhancements are good, the detachment bonus is good, but also every single stratagem in this list is extremely powerful. They have lightning fast reactions, which is -1 to hit. Now, that might not seem like that big of a deal, but it actually is, because it's one of the few defensive stratagems that you can use on vehicles, and having a vehicle that can survive at least one attack so that it can fade back is really good. And remember, you have an improved fade back ability. So that's going to be really good on things like Wave Serpents and Falcons. Skyborn Sanctuary returns. So it was in Aspect Host, but it's also in Warhost. And it's really good in Warhost as well. It's just, you know, you get out of a Wave Serpent or Falcon, you shoot at something, and you get back into it. The reason why it's better in Warhost is because when you make that fade back move, when they shoot your Wave Serpent or Falcon, you're getting that extra inch out of it. And also, you get extra battle focus tokens, so there's more love to share. Feigned Retreat is something that Aspect Host doesn't have. It returns in Warhost. Being able to fall back, shoot, and charge is really damn good. It's something you definitely want in your army because it basically prevents people from doing what my opponent did. I just remembered what the stupid dreadnought is called again. It's the Brutalis dreadnought, right? So it prevents people from tying up your Aspect Warriors after charging your Wave Serpent. So somebody charges your Wave Serpent, consolidates into your Aspect Warriors. Now it doesn't matter. They can't do that anymore because you can just fall back and kill them, right? So it saves you being able to have to deal with that in another way. Then you have Blitzing Firepower, which is a really good stratagem that gives you sustained hits while you're within 12 inches. This has so much synergy. Oh, and if you already have sustained hits, you get a 5+ crit to hit, right? You get sustained hits on 5s. This is really good with things like Dire Avengers, right? Who are now using sustained hits on 5+. A Zerman with sustained hits 5+. Can you imagine the amount of damage he can do if you have a high roll on your hits? Or use a couple of aspect tokens on your hit roll, right? But this is good for more than just that, right? Shroud Runners. If you need to screen with Shroud Runners, they already have sustained hits 1, so now they hit on 5s. They have sustained hits on a 5+, which is really good. They're pumping out 18 shots. 6 of those are going to be sustained hits. So you're going to get quite a few more hits against your opponent, which is really good for the early game trading. It's also really good on things like Wind Riders, who want to be kind of close to enemy units to get those rerolls. Now Wind Riders have sustained hits 1 and lethals. Fire and Fade. Oh, and it's, I mean, obviously you guys probably know this, but Fire Dragons, right? Sustained hits on Fire Dragons is insane. Let's just put it that way. Now you also have Fire and Fade, which gives you a D6+1 move, shoot, move ability, which now brings the amount of units that you can move back into transports to 3, right? Skyborn Sanctuary is one of them. Azurman's ability is another one. And you also have Fire and Fade, which is the third one. So that's more than all of the other detachments. Well, except for like armies that are using Star Weavers or Venoms. That's more than any other detachment that can pull off, right? Fire and Fade is really good. Fire and Fade is extremely good with things like Dark Reapers. Being able to have a unit of Dark Reapers come out of terrain, shoot something, and then move D6+1, fantastic. It provides value throughout the entire game. Then lastly, you have Webway Tunnel. Webway Tunnel is probably kind of what sets this as the top dog detachment. I think if this was like a weak, -2 to charges or some stupid stratagem like that, I would probably have said that Seer Council is the best. But Webway Tunnel allows any Eldari infantry unit, even Wraiths, even Wraith infantry, that is within 9 inches of a board edge to go back into reserve at the end of your opponent's turn and come back during your movement phase, which is really good with Wraiths. I don't know if you guys know this, but Wraiths are slow. Even with battle focus in the Spirit Conclave, they're slow. Wraith units are now super fast, being able to just, but I mean, by the way, it's any battlefield edge, right? 9 inches of one or more battlefield edges, which means even your back edge, you can go back into reserve from turn 1 at the end of your opponent's fight phase, and you can come back into reserve through, the sideboard edges or your back edge. Obviously, you're going to probably pick the sideboard edges. So that means you can pick up a Wraith unit, a Wraith infantry unit, and move them to one or the other side of the battlefield. But it's also good on other infantry as well. And it means that units like Dark Reapers that are backfield units can all of a sudden find themselves in certain angles to devastate opponents who they thought were safe. So there's just a lot of shenanigans you can pull with this. It's hard to explain it without showing you on Tabletop Simulator or, on a board. But on certain maps, there's terrain on the sides of the boards, right? So what you can do is you can move your Dark Reapers or your, kind of backfield infantry unit from the battlefield in the back, and then you can place them in another piece of terrain on the side of the battlefield, and that can throw off a lot of opponents. Because now you have the angle to be able to shoot some of their more vulnerable units, and units like Dark Reapers are now better at shooting harder targets because they have a strength 10, AP -2, damage 3 weapon that ignores cover. So yeah, it's powerful. This detachment has tools for almost every single situation you might find yourself in, and it is very versatile when it comes to list building. There's a lot of different things you can run in this type of list. If you want to run vehicles, they're fantastic. If you want to run infantry, it's fantastic. If you want to run Wraiths, there's even space and room to bring Wraith infantry in this detachment because they have more mobility. That is also very good. And you have the ability to just put battle focus tokens on everything, which is awesome. Which means, by the way, combat aspect warriors are also very, very effective in this detachment because you can invest more in things like a 6-inch consolidation or 6-inch pile-in, which can be very effective, or +2 movement, which is going to be +3 on a lot of the Aeldari units, right? Because this detachment also improves swift movement and it improves, fade back and stuff like that. So Warhost, definitely the strongest detachment that there is. I wouldn't be surprised if they tweaked something at some point because I think really competitive players are going to play Aspect Host, but they're going to realize the same thing that I said, which is, wow, they have no fallback and shoot. They have no fallback and charge, right? And then they're going to gravitate towards Warhost. So they're going to start with Aspect Host, and then they're going to gravitate towards Warhost because it's just a more well-rounded and better detachment, in my honest opinion. Obviously, I love Aspect Host. I think it's really flavorful. I think it's really fun. I think it is very competitive, too. It's just missing that one little thing, which is fallback, shoot, and charge, right? And I think, and it's missing some sort of uppy-downy thing, which I think is going to play a factor. It is going to play a factor in its competitive nature, so... All right, so that's going to be it for my rankings. Let me know what you guys think about these rankings. I actually, a few weeks ago, if you had told me what I thought would be the best, I would not have thought Warhost was the best. But after playing it, it just seems everything was so smooth when I was playing that game. It felt even better. I mean, Seer Council felt really good, but it was very, tricky, Warhost just feels smooth. It just feels like I was playing my old mech Eldar list where just everything just worked how I wanted it to work. It was really cool. So Warhost, definitely number one. Let me know what you think, guys, though, of the detachments, where you would rank them. You know, put your rankings in the comment section and explain why. I'd love to hear your rankings. You know, obviously these are just my opinions, but yeah, let me know what you guys think is the best. So, lastly, before we end this video, I do want to thank my patrons and supporters who have supported the channel over the last 2.5 years. Your help has greatly improved the channel and helped it grow significantly. Thank you so much. If you do want to become a Patreon member and join our Discord, I have free trials activated. It won't cost you a thing. It will grant you permanent access to our Discord community, of course, which is a group of Eldar players and enthusiasts who love talking about strategies, tactics, and of course, hobbying. And of course, I'm there as well. I often participate in a lot of the conversations on the Discord. So definitely looking forward to talking to some of you guys about the Eldar. And I'm always willing to help with lists, with, you know, kind of advice and things like that. So definitely hit me up if you want that. And I'm also going to leave my link for my Amazon affiliate and channel store page in the description. The Amazon affiliate link will give you some discounted Eldar mini options, and it will support the channel a little bit. And lastly, the channel store page will allow you to get some Eldar inspired apparel to rep at your local game store. All right, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.